Most women think obsession is created by doing more, saying more, or trying harder, but the truth is the opposite. The deepest attachment doesn't come from effort. It comes from a few quiet moments where a man feels something shift inside him without knowing why. And sometimes all it takes is a single word said the right way, at the right time, to change how he sees you forever. The nickname "my favorite" works because it quietly rewires how a man experiences himself in your presence without triggering his defenses or making him feel managed, evaluated, or pressured, which is exactly why it lands so deeply. Most men are conditioned to hear praise as performance-based, meaning they translate compliments into effort, comparison, or expectation. But "my favorite" bypasses all of that because it doesn't describe what he does or how he looks. It describes how he is chosen. When you call a man "my favorite," you are not placing him above others in a competitive way. You are placing him inside a private emotional position that feels personal, selective, and intentional. The human brain is wired to attach more strongly to preference than approval, because approval can be earned by anyone, but preference feels rare and specific, and rarity is what creates emotional gravity. This nickname subtly tells his subconscious that he is not interchangeable, that he occupies a role that cannot simply be replaced by someone else doing the same things, and this is where obsession begins to form, not as anxiety or dependence, but as focused attachment. It also works because it carries no demand. You are not asking him to be anything, prove anything, or give anything back, which allows his nervous system to relax instead of brace. When a man feels relaxed around a woman, his mind becomes more open to bonding, because safety precedes attachment in male psychology, even if he is not consciously aware of it. The word favorite also implies continuity without promising permanence, which is crucial because obsession grows in spaces where something feels valuable but not guaranteed. If you declared exclusivity or ownership too early, his system would resist. But "my favorite" sits in a perfect middle ground where closeness is suggested without being enforced. Timing amplifies its effect. When used after a shared moment of laughter, comfort, or quiet connection, the brain links the nickname to the emotional state he was experiencing, creating an internal association between you and that feeling. Over time, this association becomes self-reinforcing, meaning he begins to seek you out, not because he is chasing validation, but because his body remembers how it feels to be around you. The delivery matters just as much as the word itself. Said casually, almost offhand, it feels genuine rather than strategic, which prevents suspicion and keeps the interaction organic. Men are highly sensitive to perceived manipulation, even when they cannot articulate it. So the power of this nickname lies in its naturalness. It should never be overused, because repetition dulls meaning, and obsession feeds on contrast, not saturation. When he hears it occasionally, without pattern or expectation, it remains emotionally charged. The exclusivity of "my favorite" also creates a private language between you, something that belongs only to the dynamic you share. And private language is one of the strongest predictors of emotional bonding because it signals intimacy without exposure. His mind begins to replay the word later, not because you emphasized it, but because it landed softly and left space. And that space is where longing grows, where curiosity forms, where attachment quietly deepens, where he starts to feel chosen rather than pursued, valued rather than evaluated, and connected rather than controlled, which changes the way he shows up, the way he thinks about you when you are not there, and the way he begins to prioritize the connection without being asked to do so. The nickname Trouble creates obsession because it activates a man's sense of polarity without threatening his emotional safety, which is a rare balance that most interactions fail to strike. When a man hears trouble spoken toward him with warmth rather than accusation, his nervous system interprets it as permission to be fully himself, including the confident, mischievous, and assertive parts of his personality that he often keeps restrained in order to be acceptable or appropriate. This word does not praise him for being good, dependable, or impressive, and that is precisely why it works, because men are accustomed to being valued for control and restraint, not for the spark that makes them feel alive. Trouble suggests that you see his edge and you are not intimidated by it, which immediately creates attraction because confidence recognizes confidence. It also introduces a playful tension that sits between safety and desire, where obsession naturally grows because the mind becomes alert and engaged rather than passive or relaxed. Unlike flattering nicknames that inflate the ego, trouble challenges it gently, inviting him into a dynamic rather than placing him on a pedestal. This activates curiosity as his subconscious begins asking questions like, how do you see me? What part of me is she responding to? And what happens next? And curiosity is the engine of obsession. The nickname also reframes his intensity as desirable rather than something that needs to be toned down or corrected, which is deeply validating for men who have learned to suppress their natural assertiveness to avoid conflict or rejection. When a man feels accepted in his power rather than judged for it, he bonds quickly because acceptance lowers defenses, and defenses are what prevent emotional investment. The word trouble also carries a hint of risk without actual danger, which is important because obsession does not come from chaos. It comes from controlled unpredictability, the sense that something exciting could happen without the fear of emotional instability. When used sparingly, it creates a mental bookmark, a moment his brain returns to, replaying the tone, the look, the timing, and the context in which it was said. This replay is not conscious at first, but it builds familiarity with desire, making him associate you with aliveness rather than obligation. Delivery is crucial because trouble, spoken with softness and amusement, signals flirtation, while spoken sharply, would signal disapproval, and the difference lies entirely in how safe he feels receiving it. When safety is present, his system opens. When it is not, it closes. This nickname also subtly shifts the dynamic by positioning you as emotionally grounded and self-assured, someone who is not overwhelmed by his presence but intrigued by it, and men are drawn to women who meet their energy without needing to control it. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where he leans into that version of himself more fully around you because it feels welcomed rather than risky, and as he expresses more of who he is, he becomes more invested in the space where that expression is allowed. Obsession grows here not as fixation, but as attachment to a dynamic that makes him feel both seen and sparked, understood and desired, calm yet activated, which is why a single word, when chosen carefully and delivered with intention, can carry far more emotional weight than a dozen obvious compliments and linger in his mind long after the moment has passed. The nickname Protector works because it speaks directly to a man's instinctive wiring rather than his ego, activating a sense of purpose that goes far deeper than attraction or validation. From a psychological perspective, men bond most strongly to roles where they feel useful, valued, and trusted, not because they are needed to survive, but because their presence makes a meaningful difference. When you call a man protector, you are not suggesting weakness or dependency. You are signaling recognition, acknowledging a quality that many men quietly define themselves by but rarely hear reflected back to them. This word communicates trust without pressure, and trust is one of the fastest pathways to emotional investment. Unlike compliments that praise appearance or success, Protector affirms his impact, the way he shows up, the steadiness he brings, the way his presence creates a sense of grounding rather than excitement alone. Men are deeply sensitive to whether their efforts are noticed, even when they act indifferent, and this nickname tells him that what he gives emotionally and energetically has been felt. It also places him in a position of responsibility without obligation, which is critical because men resist roles that feel imposed but lean into roles that feel chosen. When the nickname is used naturally, in a moment where he has demonstrated care, attentiveness, or quiet support, his nervous system links the word to the behavior, reinforcing his desire to continue showing up in that way. This creates a loop where he invests more, not because he is asked to, but because it aligns with how he now sees himself in your life. The word protector also activates masculinity without dominance, strength without control, which is especially powerful because it allows him to feel capable without needing to overpower or perform. Many men suppress their protective instincts out of fear of being seen as overbearing or unnecessary, and when those instincts are welcomed rather than corrected, attachment deepens rapidly. This nickname subtly tells him that his presence matters, that his care has weight, that his steadiness is appreciated, and appreciation is what transforms effort into devotion. There is also an element of emotional safety embedded in this word because it signals that you feel secure with him. And men attach most strongly where they feel they can be trusted with responsibility rather than tested for worth. Timing again plays a crucial role because when spoken during calm moments rather than heightened emotion, it anchors the association to stability rather than intensity. Over time, the brain begins to associate you with the feeling of being relied upon in a healthy way, which strengthens attachment without creating pressure or fear of failure. The exclusivity implied by the nickname adds another layer because it suggests that this role exists uniquely between the two of you, not as a public label, but as a private understanding. Private meanings intensify bonds because they create a shared internal world, and shared internal worlds are where emotional loyalty forms. This nickname also encourages consistency because once a man identifies with a role, he naturally seeks to live up to it, not to impress you, but to remain aligned with the version of himself he feels most grounded in around you. The more he experiences himself as calm, capable, and valued in your presence, the more his system registers you as a place of emotional significance, a space where his instincts are not only accepted but respected, where his strength feels purposeful rather than performative, where connection feels natural rather than forced, and where his attachment grows quietly through meaning rather than intensity. The nickname calm works on a level most people underestimate because it attaches you to a physiological state rather than an emotion, and the body remembers states more deeply than it remembers words. When you call a man calm, you are not complimenting his personality in a surface way. You are naming how his nervous system feels when he is present. And this is profoundly powerful because men, often without realizing it, spend much of their lives in a low-grade state of tension. They are trained to anticipate problems, manage pressure, and stay controlled, which means true calm is rare and deeply valued. When a man hears that he is calm to you, his subconscious interprets it as evidence that his presence creates peace rather than stress, ease rather than effort, and this association becomes emotionally addictive. The brain is wired to return to environments where it feels regulated, and when you link that regulation to him, you also link yourself to the same internal state, creating a loop where thinking about you begins to soften him. Unlike excitement, which spikes the nervous system and fades quickly, calm settles into the body and lingers, making it far more likely to become a place of attachment rather than a fleeting feeling. This nickname also removes performance pressure because it does not suggest he has to impress, entertain, or prove himself. It suggests that simply being who he is enough to create safety. Men attach where they feel they can rest, and rest is not boredom, it is the absence of threat, the sense that nothing bad is about to happen emotionally. When you say, "You're so calm," or "You're my calm," after a grounded moment, his system records that moment as significant, even if he does not consciously analyze why. Over time, his body begins to associate you with relief, and relief is one of the strongest bonding mechanisms there is, because the mind seeks it instinctively. This nickname also subtly positions you as emotionally intelligent and self-aware, someone who notices internal internal states rather than just external behaviors, and men feel deeply seen when their internal impact is acknowledged. Being seen at that level creates intimacy without vulnerability overload, which is especially important for men who struggle to articulate their emotions. The word calm carries no demand, no expectation of escalation, no implied future, which keeps his defenses down and allows the attachment to form organically. It also contrasts sharply with chaos or drama, and contrast is what makes meaning stick, because if a man experiences emotional turbulence elsewhere in his life, the place where he feels calm becomes even more magnetic. Delivery matters here more than almost anywhere else, because this word should be spoken softly, without excitement, often in quieter moments, reinforcing the very state it describes. When the tone matches the meaning, the brain integrates the message more deeply, turning it into a felt truth rather than a passing comment. This nickname also works because it invites consistency. If he feels that being steady and grounded is what connects him to you, he will naturally continue to show up that way, not to earn approval, but because it feels aligned with who he is in your presence. Over time, calm becomes the emotional baseline of the connection, and from that baseline, desire, affection, and attachment grow more securely. The man does not feel hooked by intensity or pulled by uncertainty. He feels drawn by the sense that with you, his body can slow down, his mind can quiet, and his guard can lower without risk. And when a man finds a connection that regulates him rather than dysregulates him, he does not just enjoy it, he protects it, prioritizes it, and returns to it again and again without needing to be chased or convinced. The nickname mine carries such intensity because it touches the deepest layer of attachment psychology while walking a narrow line between invitation and ownership, and it only works when it is used with emotional intelligence rather than force. When spoken softly and briefly, mine does not sound like a claim, it sounds like a moment of connection that surfaced naturally, and that distinction is everything. Men are highly sensitive to anything that threatens autonomy, because autonomy is tied to identity and self-respect, so overt possessiveness often triggers withdrawal. But mine, when used sparingly and without explanation, bypasses that defense because it is not framed as control, it is framed as closeness. The power of this nickname comes from its timing and its tone, not the word itself, because when it appears in a moment of warmth, affection, or mutual presence, his nervous system interprets it as a shared truth rather than a demand. Psychologically, this word activates a sense of belonging without confinement, which is rare and deeply compelling. Belonging answers a primal need to be chosen and emotionally anchored, while confinement threatens freedom, and mine sits precisely at the intersection of those two forces. When a man hears it in the right context, his mind does not think about obligation or future pressure. It registers the feeling of being included in something intimate and exclusive. This exclusivity is not public or performative, it is private and fleeting, which makes it more powerful because the brain values what feels rare and unrepeated. The nickname also triggers a subtle shift in self-perception. He begins to see himself as emotionally connected rather than casually involved, not because you labeled the relationship, but because his body felt the implication of closeness. Men often fall into attachment through experience rather than discussion, and mine is experiential language. It bypasses analysis and lands directly in sensation. There is also an element of vulnerability embedded in this word when it is used correctly, because saying mine in a gentle way exposes your emotional presence without demanding reassurance, and vulnerability that does not ask to be managed is magnetic. It tells him you are present in the moment, not negotiating the future, and this presence allows him to stay open rather than guarded. Another reason this nickname works is that it creates a temporary emotional container, a sense that in this moment you and he exist together without interference, expectation, or audience. That container strengthens memory encoding, meaning his brain tags the moment as emotionally significant and stores it with greater intensity. Later, when he thinks about you, the feeling resurfaces before the logic does, and feelings drive behavior far more reliably than thoughts. The danger of mine is not the word itself, but repetition or explanation, because repetition turns intimacy into ownership, and explanation turns emotion into pressure. When you say it once and move on, without watching his reaction or seeking confirmation, you signal emotional security rather than neediness, and security is what allows a man to lean in rather than pull away. This nickname also works because it does not compete with his independence. It does not ask him to give anything up. It simply reflects a shared moment, and shared moments are the building blocks of attachment. Over time, his system begins to associate you with the feeling of being chosen without being claimed, connected without being trapped, and this balance is extraordinarily rare. Men often experience relationships as either too distant or too consuming, and when something lands in the middle, it stands out sharply against everything else. The word mine also subtly activates protective instincts without explicitly naming them, because when something feels personal and valued, the impulse to preserve it arises naturally. This preservation is not about jealousy or control. It is about care, priority, and attentiveness, which are the quiet signs of obsession forming in a healthy way. It is crucial that this nickname never be used during conflict or insecurity, because then it would read as a grasp for reassurance rather than a reflection of connection, and the nervous system can detect that difference instantly. When used in moments of calm intimacy, humor, or softness, it integrates seamlessly into the emotional landscape of the interaction. Men bond most deeply to women who allow emotion to emerge without forcing it, and mine is effective precisely because it emerges and then disappears, leaving behind a residue of meaning rather than a demand for response. The residue is what lingers in his thoughts, not the word itself, but the feeling it created, the subtle sense that something meaningful passed between you without needing to be defined. That undefined quality keeps the mind engaged, because clarity closes loops, but ambiguity infused with warmth keeps them open. As those loops stay open, attachment grows quietly, not through intensity or pursuit, but through the repeated experience of emotional resonance that feels safe, grounding, and significant. When a man experiences that kind of resonance, he does not feel chased or cornered, he feels drawn, and that draw strengthens over time as his system recognizes you as a place where closeness exists without cost, where intimacy feels natural rather than negotiated, and where connection arises from shared presence rather than pressure, which is why a single word, spoken once and never overused, can reshape the emotional trajectory of a connection far more powerfully than constant reassurance or overt declarations ever could. When you step back and look at the entire picture, it becomes clear that these nicknames are not magic words, but emotional signals that work because they align with how attachment actually forms. Each one speaks to a different layer of a man's inner world, his need to feel chosen rather than chased, sparked rather than managed, trusted rather than tested, regulated rather than overwhelmed, and connected rather than confined. Used with intention, restraint, and authenticity, these words create moments where he feels seen without being analyzed, closed without being pressured, and valued without having to perform. Obsession, in its healthiest form, is not about control or intensity, but about emotional gravity, the quiet pull toward the place where his nervous system feels understood and his identity feels affirmed. When your words create safety, spark, meaning, and presence all at once, attachment grows naturally, consistency follows effortlessly, and the connection deepens, not because you demanded it, but because his system chose it.